Hello, I'm Mike, and this is Will. We are the Tabletop Donkeys.
Hello.
We're bringing you issue 17 of Age of Sigmar Mortal Realms magazine today. And this issue we got a set of 5 Dreadscythe Harridans for the Nighthaunt. And before we go into the magazine, if you want to see the Dreadscythes in action, there's a time code in the description. We're heading into the issue now. First up, we have some background on Dreadscythe Harridans and their former lives. They were nurses and healers and such, and obviously that sort of thing would offend Nagash, so he twisted them into these horrible monstrosities in death. They have these bone scythes at the end of their appendages. Unlike most of Nagash's minions, they actually remember their former lives, and so have to watch on in horror as they kill people they would have fought to heal in their past lives. And then we have some more background on the Stormcast Eternals. They're fighting on the Realm of Life, Giran, against the forces of Chaos. And also how about the recovery of Gal Moraz. It's the titular Warhammer of the Warhammer Age of Sigmar. It's Sigmar's personal weapon, which was lost but was eventually recovered by the Celestial Vindicators. And there's a little short story here about some Stormcast of the Ebon Shields encountering some Nighthaunt with some Dreadscythes and fighting against them. And finally on to our build guide for the Dreadscythes. So there are some extra parts that you won't use when building these. There's one for a regular Dreadscythe as opposed to the Slasher Crone who leads the unit, so make sure you're using the 4-limbed version rather than the 2-limbed one. And they're not too hard to put together. Mainly you just need to be careful about the little spooky tendrils coming off. Make sure you don't snap any of them. And the faces are a little bit tiny, so it could be a bit of a challenge to put them together. And the painting guide, again, this is pretty similar to the other Nighthaunt stuff. It starts with the same basic only at white, with Nihilak Oxide blue cloth, painting their hair black. And there you go, that's the finished ones so far. We also got this little fold out of the Forces of Order. So essentially in Age of Sigmar, each faction is part of a larger combined faction. So you have Order, Death, Chaos and Destruction. So you've got one for the Forces of Order. So this has the Stormcast Eternals, which we've seen a few times before. We can also see the other forces. So we have the Caradron Overlords over on the left, who are a faction of Duardin, or who fly airships into battle and essentially act as mercenaries for the most part. You have the Idenef Deepkin, who are deep-dwelling elves. It says that they actually prey on mortals who sail the oceans. So the forces of order don't necessarily mean the forces of good in this universe. We have the Daughters of Cain, all led by Morathi there. You see the large bat-winged snake form there. And we have the Seraphon. They're essentially an ancient race that lives to fight chaos that actually descended from the heavens in the old world. Certainly one of the oldest races in the Warhammer universe. As I said here, the forces of order aren't necessarily good, and they aren't above fighting amongst each other as well, so they're not totally unified, but they are mostly united by their hatred of chaos in particular. We also see Morathi in her elven form there. We also see the Sylvaneth, who are sort of the woodland, nature-based creatures, led by Alariel the Everqueen there, on her big beetle. And we also see the Fire Slayers, who are another faction of Duardin, who also act as mercenaries. This also doesn't show the cities of Sigmar. I think they are mentioned later on, who are basically the mortals who live in the mortal realms. Various humans and Duardin and elves that don't make up these factions. We will see them later. And just recently there's also the Lumineth Realm Lords, who are, I imagine they'll get mentioned later on. But now we can finally get into our playthrough for this issue.
So now we're on to our playthrough, and we have our title, The Dreadscythe Menace. And the Stormcast continue to hold the Nighthaunt back at the entrance to the tomb complex, but ever more of them are turning up, and now some Dreadscythe Harridans have arrived. And here's our battlefield setup that we have to use. So we've got all the terrain on the large battle mat, but everybody starts in the graveyard side for this battle. So we've got all the Nighthaunt, we've got 10 Chain Rasters and the 5 Dreadscythe Harridans lined up on their spooky end, facing off against the 3 easy-to-build Castigators and 3 easy-to-build Sequitors, who start by the gate on the fence. And we have war scrolls for all of those things, and we do actually have some new things in here. So the first thing, well, we'll learn about over the page. The first thing we have is unit leaders now have some extra things. So, for example, the Sequitor Prime here has an extra attack for a weapon. Also another thing for Sequitors here, which is they have soul shields. So if any models in the unit are carrying a soul shield, rerolls save rolls of 1. So obviously the Sequitor Prime and the other generic Sequitor both have soul shields. Then for the Castigators, the Castigator Prime has a new rule as well. He adds +1 to hit rolls made with his Thunderhead Greatbow. And at least rules as written by the magazine, that will mean the burst of Celestial Energy triggers on a 5, because it says hit rolls of 6, and obviously 5 + 1 is 6. For him, that will trigger on a 5. We have the War Scroll for our new Dreadscythe Harridans. They have 1 wound each, an 8-inch move and a 4+ save, and they're ethereal and they can fly like all other Nighthaunt. But their weapons, their scythed limbs, they get 3 attacks which hit on 4s, wound on 3s, and have Ren -1 and 1 damage, so they get a lot of attacks. Not only that, but if they roll a 6 to wound, that is a damage 2 on that wound roll. And the Slasher Crone, who is their unit leader, also has an extra attack, so she has 4 rather than 3. Finally, the Chain Rasp Horde. There's not much new here except that the Dread Warden, their unit leader, has an extra attack. There is also a slight mistake here, or at least we believe it to be a mistake. It says that their malignant weapons have a range of melee. Fairly sure that should in fact be 1 inch. The Thorns of the Briar Queen, who are Chain Rasps, have a 1 inch range. There's no mention of range melee in the full rules, so we assume that that's supposed to be a 1 inch range and it's just a misprint. They've forgotten to change it from previous issues, so we're going to be playing that they have a 1 inch range with their weapons. So over the page it does talk about unit leaders and it shows you which models they are and says they may have their own rules which are listed on the War Scroll, as we've just seen. And then all this other stuff is just a recap of things we already know. So just on to the quick run through. Stormcast turn 1. Stormcast get to go first, and it shows all the usual things that happen, including an example of how the Castigator Prime's +1 to hit works. And the Nighthaunt turn is much as you would expect. But there is an example here which just shows what happens when you have multiple combats going on, that you do have to go back and forth picking units, and how you can split your attacks between different units depending on who you're within range of, because of course we do now have weapon range. And it does actually show here all of these Chain Rasps are attacking even though they're not all in base contact, so that's another reason why we assume they are supposed to have a 1 inch weapon range. That's it for the playthrough description, so it just carries on until one side is wiped out as usual. But on the back page we do have other command models here that mention Varklav the Cruel, who is the leader for the Thorns of the Briar Queen, who it says here he functions the same way as a Dread Warden. It also mentions the Deathbeat Drummer, who comes with the Glaive Wraith Stalkers, a slightly more unusual unit leader and has a different rule, which is mentioned here. So yeah, the Thorns at the bottom, it just says Varklav the Cruel has an extra attack. But the Glaive Wraith Stalkers, we do have an updated profile for them here. A unit that has a Deathbeat Drummer can retreat and charge in the same phase. I assume that's supposed to mean in the same turn, because you can't retreat and charge in the same phase. It doesn't happen in the same phase. But otherwise their rules are the same as they have been in previous issues. We'll probably see them in a future issue, so we might get to see the Deathbeat Drummer. But that's it for our new rules, so we'll get on to our battlefield now. So here's our battlefield setup with all our terrain and the models on it. So we've got the 3 Castigators and the 3 Sequitors lined up in front of the gate and the fence. And over on the Nighthaunt side, the Chain Rasps and the Dreadscythe Harridans. But the Stormcast Eternals get to go first, so we'll be on to Stormcast Eternals turn 1. So in the movement phase, we're going to move like this. We're treating the gate as though you can just walk through the gate without penalty rather than having to go up and over it. It doesn't say that specifically in the scenario, but it does in a later issue. So the 2 of the Castigators have moved back through the gate, but they are still in range and line of sight of things, and the Sequitors have formed a wall around the one who didn't have enough movement to get through. And then we're on to shooting, and the Castigators will shoot at the Dreadscythe Harridans, and they are all in range and line of sight. The Castigator Prime now has +1 to hit, so he is hitting on a 2 rather than a 3, and at least according to the rules in the magazine, a 5 will trigger D3 hits because a roll of 5 is modified into a 6. Not sure whether that's the case in their full rule scroll, but rules as given in the magazine, that's what happens. So, there you go, that is a 5, so that is D3 hits. Now all the other 2 Castigators hits first as well. They both missed with a double 2 because they need 3s. So D3 hits from the Prime for 2, which wound on 3s. They do wound.
4+ save for the Dreadscythes. Made 1 fail. I'll take away the one that's furthest away.
Well, that's it for the Stormcast Eternals. On to the first Nighthaunt turn.
Yeah, so my movement's very simple. We're all just going to move up. So the Dreadscythes will move up there 8 inches, and the Chain Rasps will move up 6 inches. Some of them have to stay behind the wall because they can't technically fit on the other side. So we'll be on to the charge phase. I'll start with the Dreadscythes. So the Dreadscythes get a 5-inch charge. It is going to be enough. So we're going to finish our charge like that. That one will get into base contact with that Sequitor, and then the other 3 will have to pile in to be able to fight. And then the Chain Rasp will also charge. Probably need a fairly decent roll. A 4 is definitely not going to be enough. Dreadscythes are going to pile in, so the Slasher Crone is going to go around the side. So we're all definitely within range.
Yep, they have a 1-inch weapon range, so that will be sufficient.
So we have 13 attacks from the Dreadscythes, because they have 3 each, and the Slasher Crone has an extra one. Hitting on 4s. About 3 hits. Wounding on 3s though, and 6s cause 2 damage. So there's 1 wound and 1 that will do 2 damage.
And they are at -1 rend, so I'll do the one that does 2 damage, needing 5. I'm getting it, and then the other one, needing the 5? No, so that's 1 damage going through in total. I'll put that on normal Sector, who doesn't have either a Great Mace or an extra attack. But now they get to fight back. The Great Mace will pile in round the corner like that, to be able to get within an inch. Its range is 1 inch, but that's mainly so I might be able to bring a Castigator into range. We'll just have to see in a second, but the Sectors get to attack. Start with the Great Mace. It has 2 attacks hitting on 3s, 6s cause D3 hits. So that's, okay, that's 1 plus 3 hits. Wounding on 3s. 666, and they're 2 damage each.
4 plus saves. Oh, they all die.
That's 6 damage. So that was relatively effective. So the Castigators are no longer within 3 inches, so they don't get to fight. And it'll be on to next Stormcast Eternals' turn. For movement, the Sectors will move up to be just over 3 inches away from the Chain Rasp, and the Castigators have reformed slightly behind the gate, and they can all see. And on to shooting, they will shoot 3 shots. The Prime gets +1 to hit, so I'm using a red die for the Prime. The Prime does hit, thanks to that, and 2 6s from the normal people, that's D3 hits each. For 4, so 5 hits. Wounding on 3s, 4.
4, 5 plus saves. Oh, made 2. Let's take these 2 off the end.
And onto the charge phase, the Sectors will charge in. Healing anything other than a 2, that's a 9, that will do. And end our charge there, so they can all attack, but limiting the number of Chain Rasps that can pile in and attack, because some of them will be too far away. We'll start with the Great Mace again, hitting on 3s, 6s do extra hits, double. Okay. And the remaining Sectors have 5 attacks because the Prime has 3 attacks, hitting on 3s, 3 hits, and wounding on 3s, 3 wounds.
5 plus saves. Oh, made 2 again.
And then the Chain Rasps get to pile in and attack.
Chain Rasps will pile in like so. So only 4 of them will be within an inch. That includes the Dread Wardens, so they'll get 9 attacks. 9 attacks hitting on 4s. They got 4 hits, so they're better than the Dreadcythes, apparently. Wounding on 4s, 2 wounds.
And I get my 4 plus saves, but re-rolling 1s thanks to their shields. Oh, double 2 though. So we lose the one in the middle, and I'm going to put the wound on the Prime actually, because even though she has an extra attack, the Great Mace still does more damage. But onto the Nighthaunt turn and straight to the fight phase, because
so all the Chain Rasps will be able to get in now. We have 15 attacks, hitting on 4s. 5, 6, 7, 8. Wounding on 4s. 6 wounds.
So I actually have to roll these one at a time because their War Scroll states that you can only reroll 1s on your saves if you have a Soul Shield left, and if the Prime dies, there will be no Soul Shield. So on the Prime, 4 plus. No, she dies. And then 5 more for the Great Mace. Yeah, it failed 4. So they are actually wiped out by that. But we'll go on to the Stormcast turn. So in the movement phase, we're going to retreat again, stay away from these Chain Rasps because it turns out they're quite dangerous. We've got 3 shots, we'll use red for the Prime again, hitting on 3s, or 2s in his case, that's 1 hit. Wounds on a 3. No, it didn't. So we'll be on to the Chain Rasps' turn.
So the Chain Rasps are basically just going to form a conga line to get through the gate, but we're going to need to roll at least a 6 to get within half an inch of a Castigator. So come on, roll good. 6.
It's the bare minimum.
Yeah, so we just about make it in. Luckily we can pile in an extra 3 inches in the fight phase. After piling in, we'll have 5 Chain Rasps in melee range, none of whom are the Dread Warden. So we have 10 attacks hitting on 4s. 7 hits. Wounding on 4s. Oh, that's not so good, only 2.
4 plus saves. Made on failed one, any Castigator will take a wound. And then they get to fight back. The Prime will pile in that way, and gets himself within an inch of 6 attacks hitting on 4s. 2 hits, and wounding on 4s. 1 wound.
5 plus save. Oh, made it.
But onto the Stormcast turn, and we're going to shoot in melee here, not really in retreat, because that would be foolish. Again, the red is the Prime. He hits on a 2, and the others hit with 1/6, so that's 2 plus a D3 hits. Ooh, 3, so 5 hits. Wounding on 3s, 4.
5 plus saves.
Made 3. Then we're on to fighting, so Castigators get to attack in melee again. 6 attacks hitting on 4s, 3 hits this time. And wounding on 4s, none.
So now we've got 5 regular Chain Rasps and the Dread Warden in contact, so we got 13 attacks. Hitting on 4s, 7, and wounding on 4s. Oh, 5.
5 4 plus saves. Failed 4 of them, so that's 4 damage. So that kills off 2 Castigators and leaves the Prime on 1 wound remaining, and it is the Nighthaunt turn next.
So we can all just about get in. So we've got 13 attacks again, all on the Secretary Prime. Hitting on 4s. That's 8 hits. Wounding on 4s. 3 wounds.
Yeah, he needs to fail 1 though. Yeah, and he did fail exactly 1. So after a slow start, a victory for the Nighthaunt, fairly convincingly in the end. I think we'll definitely set that up again, just to see what happens if the rolls aren't quite so extreme in one direction, perhaps. So here we are set up again. We actually put the Slasher Crone in the wrong place last time. It didn't matter because they all got into melee. And we're going to treat the gate as though it's locked, so we're not going to be able to walk through it freely, because at least in this issue the magazine doesn't mention that at all, so we just assume that actually you do have to go over it. Try that out, but see what happens. And but the Stormcast get to go first, so we'll be on to Stormcast turn 1. Because the Stormcast Eternals are so slow and their bases are so big, can't actually go over the fence in one movement without running, so not going to do that. Secretors instead have come out the front to form a wall, and the Castigators have moved the other way to try and run away from the Dreadscythe Harridans. But then they will then shoot at the Dreadscythe Harridans again, because they're still, in theory, much more dangerous than the Chain Rasps. So the prime is red die again, just about hit, and 2 hit, and 1 hit from the other. Winning on 3s, 1.
4 plus save. Failed. 1 furthest away will die.
And we're not in range to declare a charge, so on to the Nighthaunt turn.
Yeah, so much like last time, we moved up 8 inches for the Harridans and 6 inches for the Chain Rasps, and then both units will try to charge. Try the Harridans first, and 8 is easily enough to get them in. So we're going to finish our charge like so for the Harridans to make it harder for the Castigators to get in. Roll the Chain Rasps charge as well, make it a 4, so that's not going to be enough again. So the Harridans have 13 attacks, hitting on 4s. That's much better than last time. That's 9 hits. These wound on 3s and a 6, so will cause 2 damage. So no 2 damage, but 5 wounds.
So I do really have to do these one at a time because I want to keep the Great Mace alive, but if I fail all my 4 saves before, I won't be able to reroll ones on his save. So we'll start by putting them on the Secretor that isn't the Prime with shield. So the first one is a success. Second one, looking for 5s here, goes through, so it's 1 wound. Third one, kills that Secretor. The last 2 we'll just put on the Prime, so I can reroll these ones. Made 1 fair 1 wound on the Prime. So that was 3 wounds going through, and then I'm going to fight with the Secretors first. Pile in with the Great Mace, has to get within an inch of the Prime. Then the Great Mace's attacks, hitting on 3s, 6s cause extra hits, or 2 hits, well 1 hit plus D3, so 3 hits total again. Wounding on 3s, only 1.
4 plus save, nope, 2 dead Harridans.
And Prime has 3 attacks on 3s, 1 hit, wounds on a 3, no.
Yeah, I took away the 2 Harridans that were here.
And then the Castigators get to pile in and fight because they are within 3 inches. One Castigator was able to pile in close enough to get within an inch to attack. So 2 attacks on 4s, 1 hit, and wounding on 4, that's a wound.
4 plus save. That Harridans can't make any saves at all, so the other regular one will die.
Yeah, and then it will be on to the Stormcast turn. I'm not going to move anyone. I could retreat with Castigators, but then they wouldn't be able to shoot anyone, so it's better that they shoot the Slasher Crone rather than nobody at all. If that works, then the Secretors might be able to charge the Chain Rasps. We've got 3 shots, hitting on 3s or 2s for the Prime. That's 2 hits. Wounding on 3s, 1.
4 plus save. No, of course, Slasher Crone dies.
So that does leave the Secretors free to charge the Chain Rasps. I don't know what we'll need. Probably 5 might be too little. We'll measure it and see. 5 is pretty much the bare minimum to get within half an inch, so they'll get there, and then piling in like so. And the Great Mace has 2 attacks hitting on 3s, they both hit. They wound on 3s, 1 wound.
5 plus saves. Nope, that's
2 damage.
2 dead Chain Rasps, take 2 furthest away.
Do the Prime, 3 attacks on 3s, 2 hits. Wounding on 3s, 1.
5 plus, failed as well. Another dead Chain Rasp.
3 in total, and then the Chain Rasps get to pile in.
Be able to get 6 Chain Rasps within an inch of the Secretors, including the Dread Warden, so that'll be 13 attacks. 13 attacks hitting on 4s, 5 hits, and then wounding on 4s. Oh, 5 wounds though.
So once again I need to do these one at a time on the Prime, because she can reroll saves. That's a 4, and a 4, and a 5, and a 1, which I can reroll thanks to her shield, into a 3. So that she does die. The final wound is saved by this Great Mace. Now we'll be on to the Nighthaunt turn again. Chain Rasps pile in like that.
Yeah, so now we can all get in. So we'll have 15 attacks hitting on 4s. 9 hits wounding on 4s. That's 4.
4 plus saves. Made all of them. Great Mace gets 2 attack back on 3s. Ooh, try and get in the box. 2 hits. Wounding on 3s, 1 wound.
5 plus save. Nope, 2 dead Chain Rasps. That one and that one.
And then we're on to the Stormcast turn. Well, the Castigators are going to move up because I think I might just try and shoot and charge them and hope to finish them all off. 3 shots on 3s or 2s. That's 2 hits. Wounding on 3s, 2.
5+ saves, and made one, failed one. So we'll take away this one, make your charge maybe a tiny bit harder.
And the castigators will charge. Probably need a 4 now. 9 is enough. So we'll come in like that, but we're going to pick the Great Mace to fight first because I think it's a bit more effective, and also it could be killed off. 2 attacks on 3s, both hit, and that's a D3 hits from the 6. Only one, so 2 hits, swinging on 3s, 2 wounds.
5+ saves, failed, so the remaining Chainmaster will be killed.
Yeah, there's only 4 left, so that's 4 damage from the 2 damage Great Mace. And that'll be it for this episode. There are other profiles given for other unit leaders for different units, but we'll see them in issues coming up, so we'll recap those 2 games for you now. Well, that was the playthrough for issue 17 of Mortal Realms. How did you think those went?
The Dreadscythes had a pretty bad introduction. The new model curse. New models always do really badly.
Yes, their first round of attacks was
3 hits or something.
Yeah.
I think you were quite unlucky to lose that first game, mainly because I made the Chainmaster completely on fire with their attacks and wounds and saves.
Yeah, well, in a funny kind of way. The first game I thought I was going to win it after I obliterated the Harridans, and the second game I thought you were going to win it after you managed to charge in and actually do some wounds.
Yeah. Harridans completely failed to make any saves at all.
Yeah, so both games went the opposite of what I thought after the initial kind of exchange. Looking at their war scroll, at least on paper, the Harridans are quite scary as a Stormcast player because they have a ton of attacks. Okay, they only hit on 4s, but they have that -1 rend, which when you only have a 4+ save to start with, if you roll well, you can go straight through a unit of Stormcast.
Getting a 6 is to wound if you get a couple of them in.
To be honest, I was fortunate that my Great Mace wielder turned up to the battle today because did most of the damage, I think. Both games killed most of the Harridans.
And you were pretty unlucky with your shields as well, actually, throughout the games. I think you only got 1 reroll out of them, which failed as well.
I did, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, rerolling ones on saves it's a nice to have. Although we did see that funny situation where only 2 of the models in the Sequitur unit have shields, so I had to roll all those saves separately because only some of them would be rerolling ones if they got through to the Great Mace. That's the downside of having a better weapon, I suppose. And basically, I think any unit with shields has that rule. There might be some exceptions, but I think that's generally what...
It's a stepping stone to a later rule the Sequiturs get that let them potentially reroll all failed saves, so they're even tankier.
So I think with most of these Sacrosanct Chamber units, you have various special effects and you can choose one or the other in a turn. Your unit leaders, obviously. An extra attack is nice. In theory, an extra +1 to hit in shooting is nice, but still managed to miss a couple of times.
Most of the time for unit leaders, it amounts to an extra attack. The Dreadwarden for the Chainmaster does give an extra bonus while he's alive, but I don't see why you would remove him before any of the others, unless you were forced to do so.
Yeah.
I believe the Sequitur Prime has another ability we haven't seen yet. Another one is the Deathbeat Drummer for the Glaive Wraiths, that let you retreat and charge in the same turn.
And Varklov the Cruel at the end of the...
I think he also has some sort of ability that affects the Thorns while he's alive.
And again, we will get the full war scrolls for all these units eventually with all the rules, but we're just building up to them still. I guess previously we have had instances where I've been putting wounds on the Sequitur Prime, or Castigator Prime anyway, because they were no different. They are slightly different now. A bit less incentive to kill them off. Well, we also got to see the terrain actually in this game. It sort of came into effect. I mean, as you will have seen, we did dither slightly about whether or not you're able to move through the gate or not. Initially we went with yes you can, because in a later issue you can, and then we thought, well actually, it's never mentioned.
Go back and check the issues that it was introduced.
Later we decided it was locked then, and that basically meant that the Stormcast had to stay on that side of the fence, because with their slow movement, then unless they run, they're unlikely to be able to actually get over the fence.
Yeah,
it's 2 inches tall.
Yeah, it's 2 inches up and 2 inches down, and their bases are too large, so you technically don't have enough movement.
No, because you can't end on top of the fence. You can't pretend it in mid-air on top of the fence. That's not allowed. So would have had to run, and then obviously Castigators can't shoot if they run, so it's not really worth it.
Presumably there's an error from the magazine where it says that Chainmaster are melee range. Later says the Thorns have a 1 inch range, so...
It certainly doesn't mention there being such thing as melee range for weapons in the main rules pamphlet, so we assume it's just a copy and paste, and they forgot to change it. Oh, and the same as well with the +1 to hit on the Castigator Prime, triggering his extra hits. Again, I think the full war scroll is on an unmodified 6, but we're only going by what the magazine tells us, and strictly speaking it says a roll of 6 to hit, which if you roll a 5 +1, that is indeed 6. So we're going rules as written in the magazine in the absence of knowing any better at this point.
It was the same with the Night Questor's shield.
Yeah, again, it doesn't specifically say, so we just have to treat it as what's written.
Going back to the Harridans, I do quite like the models. Well, I like the way they look with their big size. They look intimidating. the fact that their appendages are their weapons.
Yeah, they're like scary monster creatures, a bit more than just ghosty types.
You can imagine one coming through a wall and just sizing you apart.
Yes, and their background's quite interesting as well, the fact that they were doctors and healers and things, and then...
Because Nagash is fond of irony. I guess maybe a little bit chunkier than some of the other Nighthaunt, because they actually have a proper thing to mount them onto the base, a big clump of spook attached to a gravestone, compared to some of the other Nighthaunt models you'll get with a magazine.
Yeah, it's not just a sort of wispy little tendril of smoke or whatever.
Also, at least in the UK, I think, there were certainly complaints on Facebook, and this happened to me as well. You got 32mm bases, but they were like Blood Bowl bases with slots and a little nub for where the ball would go. I mean, it's not the end of the world. You can just use painter's tape to cover that up, or cover it up with rocks or something, basey material. But you did get the correct bases later with issue 21, which also came with Dreadscythe Harridans. And for me as well, with that issue, I also got 5 correct bases and 5 wrong bases. To wait another issue for correct bases for the other 5. But
yeah, as you say, they are the correct size, and you can fix it. But the thing is, if you're a beginner modeler or something, and you get the wrong base, you might not necessarily know or have the confidence to know what to do.
You'd have a really big gap.
You might be a bit confused. But that's probably all for this issue, so if you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like and subscribe. Let us know your thoughts if you're playing along with this, if you're learning to play the game through this magazine, then we'd like to hear your experiences and what happened when you played this game, thoughts on the models. But that's all for now. We've been the Tabletop Donkeys, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye for now.